Hi there, I'm Juliana Carroll, and this is my sister and partner in Coffee and Tech, Lisa Jackson. Together, we are your hosts here at the Coffee Tech Talk Show, exploring anything and everything to do with work orchestration and automation. We're here to be the catalyst for industry change by reaching beyond soulless solutions, listening, and learning from all our collective experiences. Most importantly, we're building a community of people who can share, learn, and grow together.
Hey everyone, good afternoon and welcome back to Coffee Tech Talk Show. My name is Lee Jackson and I'm here with my sister, Juliana Carroll.
Hi everyone, I have my coffee. You have yours?
Yep, I got my coffee, so let's get started. At the last session, we finished all 3 series and I hope you took a lot of notes, where today we're going to be talking about money.
So if everyone agrees that this project is a great thing, why is it so hard to get it funded? So let's talk about money.
I'm ready.
Okay. Last time we talked about workflow orchestration and its definition, which is a logical flow of activities from start to end to accomplish a specific outcome in an environment where the flow is orchestrated by an automation engine. Why is starting an improvement project so hard? If everyone agrees that workflow orchestration and automation makes work better, smarter, faster, cheaper, why is it so hard to get it done? Well, one, because implementation requires money. The reality of life is that people are too busy to improve. So what you see here on the screen is this guy that's trying his hardest to bike with a square wheel, right? Can it happen? Yes, it can happen, but it takes a lot of effort. So here comes a really nice guy right behind him say, hey, I have something that'll help you, but you're gonna have to stop, working so hard for a minute and let me change the wheels. And he says, nope, I can't stop. I'm too busy, right? So most organization needs funds to initiate improvement projects to bring in temporary resources to start this project. And a lot of projects, workflow orchestration project requires people, process, and technology enhancements, and that requires funding. So let's talk about how to get it funded. There's 3 components that we're going to talk about today. One is authority and sponsorship. You have to understand the nuances of who will authorize this work and whose budget is going to come out of. Let's talk about the business justification. And the third part is, where are you in the budget cycle? Because these 3 things is something that you need to understand to get workflow orchestration or really any project funded and initiated.
So in my case, my marketing budget. This should help me.
Yes, hopefully. The question is, why should we spend our hard-earned money to fund your project, right? So the 3 major things that I use all the time for business justification is that our project will generate more revenue, or our project will save significant amount of money, more money than it costs to implement this project. Or, it may not generate more revenue, it may not save money, but it is required for regulatory requirements so that our business can continue to function and to do business without penalties, or without a cease and desist order, which can happen if you violate regulatory compliance requirements. The first one, authority and sponsorship. There's a couple of organization type, and you would really want to understand what the organization look like and who is your sponsor, right? The higher the authority, the higher the probability of success, because it's less amount of convincing, through all multiple chains, because the idea started at the top. So another thing that you have to think about is your sponsor a revenue generator, or are they shared services and therefore cost centers, right? The business have a strategy like gaining more customers, penetrating a new market, exiting a market. So you want to know their aim if this project is going to be funded by the business. And then so your business justification has to be along the lines of their strategy, right? Okay. from a shared services, a department like IT that does not generate revenue, they are given a predetermined amount of budget per year. So, just like anyone who is given a set, a number or volume of funds, then they already plan what they're going to be given a year in advance, right? So if they're given funds in December, they're already, have, okay, I'm going to spend this much money month per month, or I'm going to spend this much money quarter by quarter until December 31st, right? So you have to make sure that you know what that what those funds are, so that it meets your your target, right? So you want to build your business justification accordingly. The key thing is understanding who is your sponsor, right? Who has the authority and who will sponsor your project. The higher the authority, the higher the probability of success. So if you look to your right, there's the CEO, and there's usually a chief of staff. There's a chief product officer, chief revenue officer, which you should be very familiar with, a chief marketing officer, financial officer, information officer, human resources, and legal and compliance. So, and underneath that, there's like product A, product B. So in our coffee shop, there would be the coffee products, and then the bakery products or the online products, that type of stuff, right? So again, the higher authority, the higher the probability of success. And you have to understand whether your sponsor is a revenue generator or they're shared services, right? So if you're doing workflow orchestration for ordering coffee faster, better, and cheaper, then it's probably funded by your chief product officer, right? The business revenue generator.
Yes.
Right. So the business have a strategy, like gaining more customers, penetrating a new market, exiting a market. You want to know their aim because you want to align your business justification according to their particular strategy. You want the words to resonate, right? If your sponsor is a shared services like IT that does not generate revenue, they have a set budget. So you want to know what their budget or scope is, right? Because you don't want to create a humongous project when the budget is not necessarily there. So know your sponsor, know whether they're revenue generators or whether they're shared cost services, and build your business justification accordingly. Because you also have to make sure that you reach the right sponsors at the right levels that have to sign off on your projects, right? Know your people.
Yeah, in our world, the chief product officer would be production, right? Because what we make, what we design and build, that would be production. And then the chief revenue officer obviously is VP of sales, and then marketing, that would be me. So we also have a budget,
Yeah.
and we have to meet that every year. If we don't, then I could lose part of that budget. So, but I have to be able to justify that budget and what we get in return.
So there's a second type of organizational structure where there are multiple business lines. So a lot of banks have this type of organizational structure where there's a CEO of business A, a CEO of business B, CEO of business C, and then the shared services like financial officer, operations, human resources, legal, and so on. Okay. In these type of organization, the business have their own. Usually, they have their own procurement system, processes, right? So, in this type of business, it's easier to start projects that are business oriented, but it's really hard to get funding for enterprise wide, because then you have to work with all these different businesses and the shared services to get your project funded, right? There is a second type of organizational structure. This is usually in very, very large global organizations that has multiple businesses. So there are multiple CEO roles, essentially, because each business have their own CEOs. So therefore, they have their own strategy that differs between business A, B, and C, right? So in this situation, you really have to understand who are the money makers and therefore who are the decision makers, because they will have to authorize and contribute towards the enterprise-wide organizational funding for this type of work, right? So finding a common need across all businesses that everyone agrees upon is not so easy. It's a challenge, but it's possible. A good example is regulatory compliance. So when there is a need like SOX or SOC 2 or different, or HIPAA as you know it, or data privacy, it cuts across all the businesses. So these are common and typical need that cuts across all the business for business justification. Make sense? Let's talk about budget cycles. Mm-hmm. I have been on both sides of the table. I have been a vendor and I have been a buyer, right? Even when I'm the buyer and even when I'm the authority and even when I'm so excited because I see and I see the business justification and the work for the business justification is outlined, very well articulated, and the data is solid. It doesn't necessarily mean I can buy it tomorrow, right? It depends on whether I have this in my budget. Mm-hmm. So if I came into this, revelation of I need this project in the middle of the year, I may have to wait until next year because, because there's a certain cycle in the budget, right? So as a vendor, you should be very, very aware of that. And you have to stay on it, right? Because you want to keep, if this is June, you want to make sure that your project is shepherded all the way through the approval of the budget for the next year. And then there's an opportunity for a user lose funds, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit. But here's a typical budget cycle. I went to the internet to see what was published so that we're not using any proprietary information. But for example, this is the New York State budget cycle. You see the number here. They start in June. So in June, the authority says these are our priorities for the next year. Not this year, for the next year, right? So please start preparing your budget to meet and align with our priorities for the next year. So all the different agencies would then begin preparation in June through September and October, right? The second part of that is then the budget division review. So it would be like the business review or the IT review or the whatever organization you're part of. This is your review. And then you work with the constituents, the stakeholders, finance, and the CEO and say, yes, this is aligned. How does this align? Your number one priority is checked off, number two priority is checked off, regulatory compliance requirements checked off, and this is how much we need to meet all those, right? So then you submit that, your final budget, and then the governor's decision, or in this case, the CIO, the CEO, all the powers that be that have to sign off on that budget in November through January. And they actually execute it in January, March. This is when people start buying. That's why first quarter buying is really critical on both sides of the table, right? So if you're not talking to me as a buyer in June, mm-hmm. you're already lagging for next year, right? Especially if it's in the 7-digit figures, right? If it's a multi-million-dollar deal, you need to be there already in June. So if you can't expect to come to me no matter how much I love this project and say I need $1 million because I didn't budget for $1 million. Something worth $1 million have to stop in order for me to switch and give you that funds, which is not likely going to happen because projects are probably already in flight.
So this is based on New York State budget cycle. Is this specific for technology, or is this the company's budget in general, total budget?
This is the company's budget in general.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I think you said something earlier about you also have a budget as head of marketing. And then if you don't spend that money, you will lose it, right? If you don't spend the money, let's say that you're given $100 for the year. And then for whatever reason, you find yourself in November and you still have $50. And then, you're only going to spend $20. You're going to return that $30, right? Because you're not going to spend it. So, if I was a vendor or if I was a buyer that I found something mid-year that I hadn't planned, I start looking at my budget around October to see, will there be funds that is not going to be used? And then I'll start calling my vendors and say, hey, I don't have $1 million, but I have $100,000 maybe that I can use in November. And can we start a prototype? So that's a typical type of situation that is encountered often, both in my experience, both as a buyer and a vendor. So, so that means make sure you have your business justification ready for next year, but also means stay with it. Check in with the budget to see whether there's an availability, around October for you to maybe start and do an initial work or a planning work in November. That way you're very well positioned for, implementing in January should you be the one that are chosen. Or as a buyer, I can get the planning done early and then I can really start quickly when the funds are released in January.
Okay.
Right.
Yep.
Any questions about that or?
No, this is good. That's actually a really good tip to look at that. And I'm assuming every state would have some type of a budget cycle that they release like this.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And then, you probably encounter sometimes even during mid-year, you think, oh wow, this is a new budget. It's not really. They already have a year's worth of budget for marketing, right? But they know, for example, they're going to attend a conference, and then they just didn't initiate the search for that, in until June. But the budget is actually already was prepared and approved earlier in the year, right?
But I guess when it comes to marketing, it varies from my experience, and and it depends on the size of the company.
Right.
Some of the companies don't even start budgeting until October.
Right.
The following year, whereas companies do start budgeting, in June. And like you said, we need to make sure that we start talking to them in June, all the way to October, or you're going to miss the boat. So.
Yep. Yeah. So those are basically the three things. I just want to lay it out there because if you are a vendor, no is not a no. No is probably not the right time. So stick with it and understand the budget cycle, right? So here's the money checklist as a summary. Number 1, authority and sponsorship. Be sure that you know who your sponsor is and who the authority is to sign off of your budget.
So in my world, we call that decision maker.
Yes. Make sure you know who your decision maker is. Make sure you ask the right question and say, can they sign off on this statement of work? Can they sign off on this budget? Can they sign off on this acceptance criteria? Right?
So do you actually ask that? Because I don't ask that. We don't ask that. It's kind of like if we were presenting to you, and a lot of times you never assume, right? But you have the title of VP of Sales and VP of Marketing, you should be able to approve those budgets, right? They're supposed to be a decision maker, but I would never say, are you the one that can sign that contract? Do you guys do that?
I have learned to.
Really? Okay.
This is exactly why we're doing this, because I got caught on both sides, right? Even as even as an authority myself, when I do projects, because this is a shared service, I do projects for the business, and the business say, yes, I agree to fund for you to do this project, let's say, right? And then my team would get requirements, and then we would start working, and then we deliver it, and I say, okay, this project is now finished. Agreed. I'm going to close this project now. And then they said, well, actually, no, I don't have the authority to approve that delivery. Right. And it ends up being, another level or someone else in the business that actually has to approve. And we have not built the relationship with that person, nor have we go into details about what their requirements are and what their nuances are for delivery, right? So then let's say that, internally, I say to you, okay, this project is going to take 40 hours of resources. And then the project is delivered in what I thought on time with the right amount of resources. But then at closure, we still have to spend another 5, 6, 10, 20 hours validating, acceptance criteria and changing minute things, but still, or, have to change a lot of things because the person that is supposed to accept is not who I thought they were.
Yeah, well, in our world, we wouldn't start any of the work until that is signed. And I guess the way that we would ask is, is there a committee that makes the decision? Because a lot of times now with a lot of larger corporations, we have to deal with procurement.
Right.
And, with procurement, it's a whole other level, right? You don't really build relationships with procurement because it's a committee vote that makes the decision. But if it's VP of marketing or VP of sales, we built that relationship. And a lot of times we're only competing with 3 other companies and you've got one decision maker versus a procurement, you've got several people that we have who they are.
What can happen is, someone in procurement or the CFO team member sign off on the statement of work, but then someone else have to sign off on the delivery, that accept the delivery and say it is finished and completed, right? So I ask both questions. So are you the one that can sign off on the budget, on the actual statement of work, on the actual contract? And are you also the one that can accept delivery and therefore sign off the acceptance? And the second part is business justification. Again, build your business justification based on your buyer's roles, right? And make sure you align with their strategy and their priority. And make sure that you understand the budget cycle so that you're not caught in excitement and then find out that, well, yes, we do want this, but we can't get it done or even initiate the project until next year. You can set the right expectations on both sides of the table.
It's good to see everything lined up and in order so that it's right here in your face. And I hope that everyone can benefit from this because I actually can benefit from this as well. So I like it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Next session. What is the hottest trends? What industry are spending money on orchestration and automation? And what are some of the hottest skills in demand in this area?
That is going to be a great session, Jay. I am all about the hottest trends and, to see what companies are spending and what hottest skills. I would make sure that you guys tune in and watch this at our next session. So with that said, thank you all for watching this episode. If you want this presentation, again, make sure you email us and maybe for a cup of coffee, JC will send you the presentation. So with that said, anything else, Jay?
Nope. Until next time.
Until next time.